Henry Thompson was a 75-year-old African-American veteran who sat quietly at a modest corner booth in a bustling diner. The noise of clinking cutlery, casual laughter, and conversation filled the air. Henry wore a well-worn yet tidy jacket, and his weathered hands were gently wrapped around a cup of coffee he had ordered while waiting. The energy of the place was bright, typical of a neighborhood diner during lunch rush, but Henry's demeanor was calm and patient. He was waiting for his son, who had called to say he'd be running late. What Henry didn't know was that before his son arrived, something darker would step through the door. The entrance swung open with a jingle, and two uniformed police officers walked in, Officer Daniels and Officer Carter. They strolled in confidently, scanning the room as if they owned it. Their badges glinted under the fluorescent lights, and their eyes quickly locked on Henry, sitting alone in the corner. Daniels leaned toward Carter and murmured something with a smug grin. Carter snickered. To them, Henry seemed out of place in this mostly white part of town. An elderly black man in their space? Suspicious. They sauntered over to his table without even pretending it was about anything official. Daniels stepped forward and, in a cold, clipped voice, asked Henry what he was doing there. No greeting, no respect, just a sharp demand for justification. Henry looked up slowly, his expression measured. He replied that he was waiting for someone. His tone was even, not defensive. He'd been through worse. Carter chimed in, his voice laced with mockery. "Trying to blend in with the important folks, huh?" He chuckled. Daniels snorted in amusement. They were trying to provoke him, but Henry wouldn't give them that satisfaction. He repeated calmly that he was waiting for his son. Apparently, Henry's peaceful composure irritated them more. Daniels insisted on seeing ID. No courtesy, no legal reason, just authority flexed for its own sake. Henry reached into his jacket and pulled out his veteran ID. It was old, worn at the corners, but the pride it represented was fresh in his heart. Daniels glanced at it and scoffed. "This your idea of a joke?" he snapped, flinging the card back like trash. Carter joined in the insult. "Back in your day, people like you scrubbed pots. What did you do, clean up after the real soldiers?" The laughter between them was cruel and loud. Daniels nodded. "Those were better days, when folks like you knew their place." Henry remained still. Inside, rage simmered, but he'd learned long ago that staying calm in the face of hate was its own kind of power. The officers weren't satisfied. They ordered him to leave, threatening to drag him out if he didn't comply. Henry once again said he was waiting for his son. Daniels interrupted, barking over him, calling him a liar, a trespasser, a problem. By now, the diner had gone nearly silent. Customers were watching. Some frowned, others looked away, but no one stepped in. The officers loomed over the elderly man, hoping he'd resist, hoping he'd give them an excuse. But Henry just sat there, still as stone, his hand resting beside his coffee cup. Daniels leaned down close, his face inches from Henry's. "Last chance, old man." Henry didn't flinch. He took a slow sip of coffee and spoke calmly. "I'm not disturbing anyone. I'm just a father waiting for his son." That sentence, spoken so simply, caught Daniels off guard. The smugness on his face cracked, if only for a moment. Still, their ego wouldn't let up. Then, without warning, Daniels shoved Henry's chair backward. It clattered loudly. Gasps rippled through the diner. Henry was forced to his feet, but he kept his balance. Daniels patted him down roughly, barking something about safety and suspicion. Henry raised his arm slightly, not out of fear, but compliance. He'd been here before. He knew how quickly things could turn deadly. Carter, meanwhile, snatched Henry's hat from the table, a faded veteran cap, and turned it over with disgust. With a sneer, he dropped it to the floor. "You don't deserve this!" he spat. For the first time, emotion flickered on Henry's face. Anger, but he held it in. He would not break. Then Carter grabbed Henry's wrist and twisted it painfully behind his back. Laughter followed as Henry winced. "Not so tough now, are you?" they mocked. Still, Henry didn't cry out. He had endured war. He had endured racism. He had endured loss. But this disrespect in the country he served, cut deep. "You've gone too far," Henry finally said, his voice tight. "You have no idea what I've lived through. I deserve better than this." Daniel sneered. "You don't tell us how to act. You're spending tonight in a cell. Let's see who comes to save you." They slapped the cuffs on. Carter picked up Henry's old walking cane, inspected it with mock curiosity, and then, with a snap, broke it across his knee. The crowd gasped. A few stood, stunned. Still, no one stepped in. As they began to drag Henry toward the door, he looked back and motioned toward the small card left on the table. Daniels rolled his eyes, grabbed it, just to shut the old man up. Then everything changed. Written in bold on the card, Commissioner Thompson. Reservation for 2. Daniels froze. His face drained of all color. The man they had just abused was the father of their boss, the police commissioner. Panic swept over Daniels. He let go of Henry as if he'd just touched fire. We didn't know," he stammered. But Henry didn't say a word. He stood tall, silent. Then the diner door opened again. In walked Commissioner Robert Thompson, a tall man, sharp-eyed, his presence enough to silence the entire room. He had been called by a concerned diner who recognized Henry. Robert's gaze swept the room, his father in cuffs, his cane broken, 2 of his officers pale with shame, his jaw clenched. He approached, stopping beside his father. With quiet fury, he asked the officers, "What do you think you were doing?" Daniels and Carter fumbled, tripping over apologies. "We didn't realize who he was." The commissioner didn't yell. He didn't need to. "You think that excuses it?" he said coldly. "You think it matters who he is? Every citizen deserves respect. This man is a veteran, a father, and you treated him like dirt." The weight of his words crushed any remaining arrogance. Then, without another word, he ordered, "Leave. Now, report to my office first thing tomorrow." The officers, humiliated, left in silence. Robert turned to his father, pulled out the handcuff key, and gently removed the restraints. Henry flexed his stiff wrists, his eyes meeting his son's. Pride passed silently between them. "I'm sorry I was late," Robert said, his voice low. "I'm sorry they did this." Henry shook his head. "You handled it. That's what matters." They sat together in that quiet moment, a father who had served with honor, a son now standing for justice. But the story didn't end at the diner. Word spread fast. Outrage rippled through the community. People were horrified. The police department launched an immediate investigation. Daniels and Carter were suspended for 6 months without pay and ordered to attend mandatory bias and conduct retraining. The incident became a symbol, a wake-up call. Under Commissioner Thompson's leadership, changes were set in motion to ensure that respect, not prejudice, would guide their force. For Henry, it was a painful experience, but one that reaffirmed his belief in the values he had lived by: strength, dignity, and quiet resilience. He had endured injustice before, but now he had a son who could fight back, and a community beginning to listen.